What's going on, folks? This is Acid Roots. I'm going to review an R&B album by Tinashe, and this is basically her debut album, Aquarius. Now, to me, this is a pretty revolutionary album in a lot of ways, just because I think that this project helped kind of modernize streaming services like Spotify, kind of being like more of the norm as opposed to just CDs and in some cases vinyl and cassettes and that type stuff. But this is really, I think 2013 kind of did that a little bit, but I feel like 2014 was kind of more the year where that started to get more widespread and kind of bust open the floodgates there. And this is definitely, even though this came out at the end of 2014, I still feel like it had enough presence to where it helped shape things as far as that kind of went. So it deserves credit there. As something I feel like Tinashe kind of does not get the credit that she probably could use. She's kind of been seen as like the next door neighbor to like the breakout R&B star. Not quite as large as Chris Brown, not quite as large as T-Pain, not quite as large as Usher, not quite as large as like Nate Dogg or folks like that. But I do feel like she definitely has some serviceable R&B and a good chunk of hot singles as well. It's pretty interesting as how it works, because Tinashe kind of is somewhat in the rap realm, but also kind of does like really kind of contemporary R&B. So it's not just like kind of more, I mean, she has the ability to kind of do like slower songs and she pulls it off. This is an example of a project where the slower songs, where there's not so much full blown ballads, but there's definitely some stuff that kind of has like the vibe of modern day kind of love making and that type stuff. There's fucking songs, there's love making, there's that type stuff, as far as trying to say that Tinashe has like, because it's an R&B album, it just covers more than just like the club and that type stuff and the initial hookup and some of those type moments and the flirting moments where it's actually, and it's interesting just as far as it kind of goes, just because this is a really good project. I mean, I'm going to have to say, I'm just go ahead and let the cat out of the bag that this project's going to get a 10 out of 10 just because of how the finesse of how this project really works is just that good, with the elements of R&B, the fact that it has 3 hit singles, even though one of them kind of takes up the girth of like the popularity, it just has enough to kind of say that it's a pretty solitary R&B album. And it also manages to cover bases in a different lot of angles, and it does so more than once. There's, obviously the DJ Mustard song is the single, but it has multiple follow-ups, and there's just an amount of angles that this project covers that showcase that R&B albums can be pretty top notch and classic also if given the opportunity. A lot of times I'll have complaints about R&B albums across like the 2000s and especially the 90s, because the single is always the best moment, but this does a good job about like fleshing it out and kind of saying like, hey, there's definitely more than just 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 hit moments to kind of write home about. So that's something to know. But I'll go ahead and talk about the singles. So the first single was Two On. This has Schoolboy Q on there, and it's pretty like, the beat when I initially heard it back in the day was just real electrifying, real kind of sounded like kind of electro R&B in a lot of ways. This real has like a contemporary and kind of very lit feeling about it. I mean, this album kind of has a theme of like a watery vibe. You can tell by the title Aquarius. So a lot of this is kind of more splashy and a lot more kind of moody and ambient in a lot of ways, but sometimes the pace kind of picks up like with High Tide and that type stuff. So it kind of has like some good moments, but I really feel like this is like a good example of what to do on a first single and as a song for going out on a weekend. It's just a great song for the Friday night. It's a brief song. It's less than 4 minutes. I'm not complaining that it's a brief song, but it has the perfect length and it's just the perfect energy capturing song. This was a hit song back when it came out back in 2014. There is not a hit as large as this song. This is probably one of the best songs on this album, but it still stands to reason that the infectious energy is just needed to be replicated. And that's kind of the concept, but it is outstanding. Schoolboy handles the verse on this song pretty well, and he fits the song. And Tinashe has some melodic kind of singing on here that just makes it very hypnotic in a lot of ways and infectious. So great first single. I really appreciate that DJ Mustard did the beat. I really kind of wish that he would have done at least another follow up, because that was the problem I had with DJ Mustard back in the day. He would always give like an artist like a hit single. He did that with a number of artists. I don't remember at this point, but he just would usually only give them, like Jason Derulo, he only gave one beat with that Kama Sutra song, but he wouldn't give them anything else. And this is an example where DJ Mustard kind of ruined. I'm digressing, but this is an example of DJ Mustard needing to give Tinashe more beats. They had chemistry, is what I'm trying to say, but it definitely should have. Second single is Pretend with ASAP Rocky. This is a real watery sounding kind of song, a lot more ambient and not quite as high up tempo and fast paced and quick kind of notation about it as Two On. Definitely not seen as like a Friday night kind of song, but just more of like kind of mellow, kind of hey, I haven't seen you in a while kind of song, and just that kind of vibe as far as like this more mid tempo, but just kind of in like a softer like R&B kind of flavor. I mean, it's interesting because Tinashe did not go from like a high tempo, fast paced first single to like a low tempo mid or a down tempo kind of slower song right off the bat. It just kind of it meets you halfway. I can see this song kind of not having the energy of Two On, and it didn't quite chart as high, but it was just a good attempt just because it's R&B. I mean, really it's not as if R&B has to have like club songs all the time, but it just looks after it. I feel like maybe All Hands on Deck would have been the better pick for the second single, but Pretend still serves its purpose. Is like I like the topic of this, just how it's kind of almost like a mellow and kind of woozy kind of song, almost like a sad song, just in the sense of wanting to pretend about situations, like acting like we're not angry with each other in those type moments. But it's a clever topic, but it's just kind of like the energy may almost be off-putting going from Two On to this. It's just kind of in a different format where it's just not quite as social a song as Two On was, but it's good. I like, once again, I like this song. All Hands on Deck is the third single. This is probably one of my favorite songs off the album. Also has a great hypnotic beat. Real kind of the bells in this song are just the whatever the kind of bellish kind of tone in the song is. The arrangement of the notes on here, the arrangement of the notes on here just works extremely well. Real hypnotic, infectious. Feels like the proper follow up to Two On. The remix, if you can find it, has Iggy Azalea or Dej Loaf on there, so one of those two chicks will be on there. They both, I mean, I remember the Iggy Azalea version, but it's been a while since I heard it. But I do like the original version. It's pretty stellar. I definitely think as a single, this is quite a hypnotic song, and this would have been the second song that Tinashe could have used since breaking mainstream. Now, I haven't really talked about Black Water, which was the mixtape. I reviewed that in the spring of last year, 2021. And like I remember enjoying that pretty well, but it really didn't have much singles beyond the song Vulnerable. So this made talking like Tinashe was relatively new. Like the Black Water was kind of her on the verge of blowing up kind of mixtape and project, but this is like her breakout project. So really, I would say this is that would have pretty much only been like her third or fourth hit would have been All Hands on Deck. But just to kind of say, just to get like a a, a care package of Tinashe, I would definitely say like Vulnerable, Two On, All Hands on Deck are all intended for like a night out and a weekend, because Pretend is just more intimate. But yeah, that's basically the singles, three singles on here. Like a lot of this has like a lot of, like I was saying, Spotify kind of induced music, which is just more kind of ambient and kind of wafting and that type of stuff, and kind of creeping and like a sensual sense, and just kind of being in your elements and kind of just letting it, yeah, like letting the feeling kind of rise and stuff. And I feel like it's interesting just because there were not many projects doing this at this point in time. Like when you compare, like maybe Drake was doing this with Nothing Was the Same, but apart from like that, I feel like there just weren't enough albums that kind of had this vibe down. Like for example, songs like Bet, Cold Sweat, Bated Breath, Cold Sweat, Bated Breath, and like Far Side of the Moon kind of have like these kind of elements of just kind of more, you just are playing some stuff on Spotify in a playlist. You're just kind of playing stuff in Spotify in a playlist with whoever's with you, whichever female or whoever's with you, and that type stuff, and just kind of letting it cruise through the night. And that's just kind of the situation as far as that goes. It's just a different kind of concept because You know, it's not just in a stereo, on the radio, in a car, on YouTube or something like that. You can really just put these in a playlist and just let it kind of, the ambience kind of go through. It's just kind of like listening to like tunes to get you to sleep and that type of stuff, but just in a more romantic setting. And that's just kind of the concept as far as that goes. It was clever of Tinashe to kind of come up with this just to provide like playlist kind of music, or it's not just, oh, I like this song, oh, I just like Two On and that's all I've grabbed from this project, or oh, I just like All Hands on Deck. But actually, you nab a number of songs from this album, you put them in a playlist, and it just kind of sinks into one and another, and it definitely works. I feel like Thug Cry is another example of some good R&B on here. This could have probably been a single. Nice, good, catchy chorus, and amicable topic just to kind of say. I feel like Wildfire had some really melodic singing on there. Like the production on most of these are pretty good. Like I feel like Thug Cry was kind of popish and R&B-ish, but like Wildfire is just kind of got like a kind of club setting, just kind of more in like almost like a pub or something like that. Just kind of gave me those kind of vibes. There's not too many songs like All Hands on Deck and Two On. It feels like Tinashe doesn't really step out too much, but I'm glad that she, at least the moments where she does, she has like a suave enough feeling to kind of give her some charm and like spunk, and just kind of like, hey, she's a wreck, kind of a jovial kind of individual, kind of compelling and that type of stuff. I feel like How Many Times is kind of like classic R&B. This is the sort of stuff that you would have heard from like Trey songs and stuff. And I think I pretty much described most of the project now. Just kind of say Feels Like Vegas is another one that's kind of like a real kind of out on the weekend kind of number. Not so much in the club or in like a night venue or something like that, but just kind of more cruising in the car type stuff, sitting in like a parking lot or someplace on like a cliff, just listening to music and hanging out with some chick, that type of stuff. Just good vibes about that. So that's really about the project, just to be able to talk about it. Like I said, there are only two real songs. There are only two real songs out of 12. There's actually 18 songs on here, but 6 of them are skits and interludes. But out of the 12 songs, the only 2 songs I didn't really enjoy were just Far Side of the Moon and then Bet. I mean, Bet to me was kind of too long of a song. This was another song that was trying to be more of like a Spotify playlist of the songs I mentioned, like and Cold Sweat and Bated Breath, and some of those, like in Bated Breath and Cold Sweat. I mean, yeah, I've described some of the in Aquarius, the title track. That's another one that was kind of a Spotify more playlist type song. So there's just a number of these, but I felt like Bet was just a little bit too long. It was kind of 6 minutes, and it was just not quite as melodic as Tinashe normally is. I really felt like that could have been a lot better. Too lengthy, and just didn't have like enough synchronization to really click with me as far as that goes. I definitely feel like she did it better on the title track Aquarius, and I definitely feel like she did it better on like Feels Like Vegas and Bated Breath. Some of those are just better examples, even though Bated Breath was the longer song than Bet. So it's just kind of, but still, I mean, it's just some of these kind of get melodic, but Tinashe kind of does like the same trick that The Weeknd was doing back in like his trilogy albums, or like House of Balloons and stuff, where he would just kind of sing in the background and it just would be a bunch of melodic singing and that type stuff. So that was kind of what R&B was up to in the 2010s. Tinashe was kind of pulling it off, but I feel like not to denounce Tinashe, but it just it wasn't as effective as it could have been on Bet. So those are the only 2 songs I didn't enjoy, but I basically talked about the whole project. If I had to describe like the ones I would go for in like a night setting, I would definitely say Two On, All Hands on Deck, Feels Like Vegas, and Thug Cry are pretty good for that, and maybe Wildfire also. So you get about half the project that kind of does it. And then songs like Cold Sweat, Bated Breath, How Many Times, Aquarius, and Bet are all songs that are kind of more for like a sensual kind of night and chilling and just kind of hanging out with a woman. The music's playing, you can sit on a nice couch. It's a comfortable couch, that type of stuff. You get some snacks, and you just kind of mingle a bit and kind of just a more sensual night and that type of stuff. So that's definitely kind of the instance as far as that goes. Some of these can even be seen as smashing songs, that type of stuff. It definitely has the intent. It is R&B, so it's not quite like the "Let's Get It On" of Marvin Gaye and that type stuff type vibes, but I would definitely say it stands to reason for circa 2014. It definitely has the ability to say, hey, yeah, we fucked to this song and that type of stuff. So that's just kind of the concept. So it works in that context. But yeah, so the album gets a 10 out of 10. I definitely feel like this is something to pick up. Even if you just prefer streaming services or something like that, I would still say the CD version of this project is not a bad offer. Definitely, now that it's 8 years old, it's relatively cheap, probably as well. And then I would say the social score, I'm a little bit disappointed in like this promotion of this project. I definitely felt like it probably could have used more. Tinashe did good with 3 singles, considering that this was only her first album, but it still feels somewhat underwhelming. So I'm gonna give the social score like a 6.5 out of 10, because Two On and All Hands on Deck were good, but I think it probably needed another project, because I feel like Pretend, while a good song, the angle behind it just kind of like I definitely feel like R&B artists have to establish themselves a lot quicker, because most of the time, like when you think of Usher or T-Pain or people like that, Neo, some of those folks, they kind of tend to falter, because like Usher for like the song Yeah, and Neo for like the song Sick of Love Songs and those type moments. But the problem with it is, when an R&B singer gets a huge hit, they have to immediately follow it up, or they become a one-hit wonder, and that's usually what happens. And I want to say that that basically happened to Tinashe, because her later projects just couldn't capture the energy of Aquarius, the album, or the single Two On with Schoolboy Q, and it happened. But it's kind of disappointing, because All Hands on Deck was a pretty fucking good song, and it had as good of a beat as Two On, or at least in the same range of it. But I don't blame Pretend for it. It's just the fact that R&B is just kind of tricky, because if it doesn't have the energy that kind of is able to connect with people, it just kind of can like disturb like the project's momentum. So that's just kind of the concept behind it. But it gets a 6.5. I mean, Tinashe has the hits on here, just the singles, But that's kind of the situation. So in terms of the future, like Tinashe dropped an album in the summer of 2021 called like 333 or something like that. She just dropped an album recently. She'll probably get ready to put out another one. I'm going to start reviewing more of these as time goes on, but I definitely remember this, and I do own this album, or at least I did, but the disc kind of got caught in a computer. But yeah, I just would have to say it's a great project. I gave it a 10 out of 10, so just understand this is an example of R&B that's kick-ass, despite the fact that it kind of, the reception of it was kind of mixed a little bit.